Hello, crafty friends. I am Beth Roy, an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. Welcome to my channel, Stamp and Create with Beth. Today, I'm going to show you a quick card with the new Piece to You stamp set. I love this set. I think the images are gorgeous. I'm going to be working with the Holy Family image on this card, but I do have some other card samples and tips for you toward the end. So let me tell you what I've used on this card, and then we'll get busy and I'll tell you all the measurements. I've used Piece to You stamp set. These are very solid images. They actually stamp the background and some of the parts of the people of the Holy Family and some parts of the church, but most of it is like the negative space, if that makes sense. So the solid area is quite large for this stamp. So I'm going to show you some tips on how to get a great image with this set. I'm also using the Hope and Peace. This is just a greeting set. I love this. I love all the sayings for Christmas time. So if you're looking to add a greeting set to your list. And I'm going to use a surprise product today, Watercolor Shapes, to help fill in this background and give it kind of a rustic look. This is in the 2022-23 annual catalog, and these two stamp sets are in the July to December 2022 mini catalog. So let's get started. I'm going to be using the Stamparatus today. I already have my greetings mounted, so I'm going to leave those as is. And I'm using the Stamparatus because the image is so solid that I've found when I stamp with it, I really need to stamp it twice and put a lot of pressure. And because it is a red rubber stamp, you can't see through it. It is not easy to line back up. So I really highly recommend using the Stamparatus or a stamp positioning tool, whatever you have. So I'm just getting a grid sheet in my Stamparatus. Oops. And we have two sides to our grid sheet. One's inches. And I've stamped with this quite a bit. So I do recommend having a piece of paper bigger than the area you want to use, just so that you don't have to get near this hinge. When we stamp near the hinge, because it's removable and it's quite thick, there's not as much give here as if you put it further down onto the stamping platform. So let's see here. I used Balmy Blue for my watercolor background, and I used Night of Navy. Now, I've stamped this a few times, and I just really love it in Night of Navy. So I'm going to stick with that color, but feel free to substitute in whatever colors you like, whatever blues you like, or the new Starry Sky. The blue-violet color would be great too. Grab my measurements here. So I have a Night of Navy card base. It is 5.5 by 8.5. I score mine at 4 1/4, or you can just fold it in half. And I do like to use my bone folder. I'll do that in a second. And then I have a white piece that is 5 inches by 3 inches. Now, I did cut this down to exactly how I wanted it for the front of my card. However, when I stamped this piece, I actually stamped it on a bigger sheet like this and then trimmed it down to how I wanted it. So I do recommend doing that. This is the image I used for the video, the coloring video I did with the blends. So I do recommend stamping on a bigger piece. And then you can always, once you cut it down, you can use your scraps for greetings or your sentiment pieces, labels, whatever. And on this card, I'm actually going to use watercolor pencils. So I have mine all stored together in a big case. And I'm going to use both sets of pencils, I believe. Because I'm using Early Espresso. And I'm going to use Cajun Craze, Crushed Curry, and the Balmy Blue pencil for this. I also have a little bit of Wink of Stella on there. If you want to add a little shine, I do have Wink of Stella on the star. So those are the products. That's the bit we're going to stamp. I have an inside piece of basic white. It is 5 1/4 by 4, I believe. Let's see, wrong direction. I take that back. It is 5 by 3 3/4. So I use 2 sizes of mats for my inside. It just depends on what I want it to look like at the end. So I just kept it really simple on the inside. And then this is for my greeting. It is 2 1/2 by 1. So those are our pieces, and let's get to stamping. We're also going to do a little bit of masking today, so I'm going to show you that as well. But first, let's stamp our Holy Family image. Put all these other pieces off to the side. And I have found when I'm going this direction, I do have a little bit of a hard time. So it just kind of depends on what you're comfortable with and where you want to stamp. I'm going to move this down just a little bit, and I am going to use my magnets to secure my paper. So I'm just going to try to get it in the middle. If you've noticed, if you have this stamp set, I don't feel like these are exactly equal. And even the square, I don't feel like it's exactly square. It looks like it, but when I go to cut it down, either I'm off a little bit or it's the stamp. I'm not sure. Could be me. But I'm just going to put this about the middle. And I'm just trying to eyeball it, make sure that it's straight. You might want to note if on the rubber, if it's really far from an edge, it may not be exact to your sticker. This one looks pretty close. You can tell it's a little closer on this side, so I'm just trying to do my best. It doesn't have to be perfect. And another thing that I like to do is I like to mark where my paper was. Just in case it should move, I will know. Oops. Okay, now I'm just going to pick this up. And like I said, you can stamp either direction, whatever your preference is. And I'm just tapping on the ink. You can twist it a little bit. Lines from your ink pad will show up. So if you see that there's a line here from where you're inking and where your pad is, and then you moved, it will show up that way on your stamp, on your image. So I just inked it really well. That's Night of Navy. And I'm just going to hold this here. I want all of that ink to really soak in and get into my cardstock. And I feel like Night of Navy takes a little bit. You'll notice if you open your plate and your stamp looks like it still has a lot of ink on it, it's because it didn't go into the paper. So see how this still has ink on it? And up here, I didn't have enough pressure. It could be that I'm close to my magnet, so it's just not wanting to go down as far. So that looks pretty good. That image is fine with one stamping, but I just felt like it was still kind of grainy looking. So I inked mine up again. And maybe if I was patient and I really left the hinge closed, the plate closed, I mean, it may have soaked in a little bit more ink. But I'm an impatient crafter. So I'm just going to hold this here. You can rub it. You can use your fist, or if you have one of those Chucky tools or whatever they're called that applies pressure, that would be great too. So there's our image. See how much ink is still left on my stamp? So like I said, you could close this and leave it closed for a second and just hold it down. Put a little bit of pressure on it. And I'm going to mask this image. So I want it to be pretty dark because I noticed when I did my masking for this card that it does peel away a little bit of the blue ink. Masking paper is sticky, it lays over top. So I did notice that it pulled it away a little bit. So what I'm using is, this is in the 22 to 23 annual catalog. It's just the Stampin' Up! Mask paper, masking paper. And so you stamp on this side, and then this side is perforated. It's the sticky side. So you don't want to stamp on this side where it folds apart. You want to stamp on the other side. And then you can cut around your image and create a mask. And I stuck mine inside my stamp case so that I could use it again. And I cut it very close to the image. So because it's Night of Navy, I'm not too concerned with the balmy blue if it overlaps a little bit. But I wanted to make sure that my image would be covered. So we're going to stick that on. First, I'm going to take off this. And I use my Simply Chamois to clean my stuff on my Stamparatus. And I actually have this one's cut in half just so that I can hold it easier. And I just rub and dab that. Sorry for shaking the camera. And just be careful because it will come off on your hands, even if it won't come off on another stamp. I have noticed that I tend to end up with Night of Navy hands when I'm done. So I like to just wipe this off a little bit, and then I will take it off of there and clean it a little bit better with my Stampin' Scrub. But we'll leave that there for just a moment. I'm going to move the Stamparatus. So if you were making multiple cards, you could leave your image like this and then place your paper right back where you had it, because I've marked on my grid paper where I had it. And as long as my grid paper stays pushed into that corner, I will know where I had my piece of paper, and I could make multiple cards that way. So if you like to make sets of cards for your Christmas cards, that's a great thing to do. And don't worry about the pencil mark. I made a little pencil mark on my paper. That will erase. So I already have my image stamped and cut out on the masking paper. And we are going to cover it up so that this stays white. I guess if you wanted it all blue, you could just stamp right over top of it. Now, I did notice I had a little bit of a hard time trying to line this up and make sure that I really covered the white parts. So I'm just taking my time, and I cut it a little short. So it's really tight to the image. And then I'm just pressing it down, and then we're going to stamp right over top of that. So I've got a scrap paper here, And the watercolor shapes are photopolymer. So I'm using this large rectangle right here. And you will need your Stampin' Pierce mat or your mat from your Stamparatus, if you have that handy. And then I have a scrap, just a scrap piece of grid paper here. And you just need a block that will fit your stamp. And I'm going to take Balmy Blue. Make sure my mask is really down on there. I'm going to take Balmy Blue and just stamp all the way down. And then we'll color, do some coloring with the watercolor pencils. The watercolor pencils are a different look than the Stampin' Blends. So I will link in this description the video of me coloring with the Stampin' Blends if you haven't seen that one, and you can color your image however you like. Okay, so I think I have that pretty well inked up. I'm actually going to stamp off first because this is quite dark, so it's up to you. If you like it that color, then do a first generation. Otherwise, I'm going to do this, which is a second generation. And I'm just picking a spot and I'm going to start. Oh, my grid, it looks like my grid paper. Let's use a different piece to stamp off on. Or should I just, we'll just go with it. That way it has the same pattern all the way down. It actually picked up my grid paper lines, which if you look on this one too, I stamped off on one that had writing and it actually picked up my scribbles. So interesting. Every once in a while, I have things like that happen. Kind of funny. So we'll just stamp off again. I guess we got a little extra texture on this one. I'm just trying to line up my edges. I'm not right over top of where I'm stamping, so a little bit difficult to see. And you want to make sure you press really hard around these edges where they meet. That's one of the reasons why you want to cut it so tight to your image. And even, like I said, this is Night of Navy, so this Balmy Blue isn't going to hurt it. So stamp off. And so you want to kind of rub right where it meets with that masking paper and put a lot of pressure there. And don't worry about those lines. We're not worried about it. We're going for the texture. You notice none of them picked up that. Oh well. It's okay. It's still a usable card. It just has some interesting things to it. So stamp off. And then we're going to stamp this last little bit down here. And like I said, I'm fine with the lines. If you are not, then you can get a little more precise with lining it up. But I like the texture behind it. You could also leave it white. I'm going to show you some samples when I'm done with this card. And you can see some other ways that I used it. I do have some tips for the church as well. And I have some samples with the church image. Okay, so we're done with that. Now we can pull off the mask and reveal and you just want to see how it has some blue ink on the back there. You just want to take your time peeling it off. You don't want to go too quick or you'll rip it. So there we have the background. Like I said, just make sure you push really hard. I always end up with little bits of texture. I probably had something on my stamp. I'm okay with that. I like to go for the textured look, so those little imperfections do not bother me. Okay, so now we're going to color. And when I'm coloring with the watercolor pencils, I just use a light touch to begin with. And then you can always add more pressure. So I'm just getting out the colors I want. Crushed Curry, Early Espresso, Cajun Craze is going to be for Joseph's Garment and Jesus. And then I have Balmy Blue for Mary. We also have a Night of Navy pencil, so if you want it to be a little bit darker, you could add both. So I'll just pull that out so I can show you how you could add some shading for that. It is a night scene, so it makes sense that there would be some shadows. Okay, so let's start with Mary. It's just where I like to start. You can start wherever. And I do turn my project according to how I'm coloring. So at first, you just want to come in with a really light hand and start laying down some color where you want it. And then we'll just keep adding layers until it's as dark as we want. And I'm just kind of doing circles and a back and forth. You can crosshatch or whatever coloring method you like. Now, I'm not adding water to this. If you decide you want to watercolor this image, I highly recommend this Stays on Ink. It comes in saddle brown or jet black, I believe. Because if you touch this Night of Navy with water, then it's going to mix because this is a water-based ink as well. So you could watercolor it, or you could use a blender pen with these pencils. Now this is Night of Navy, so I'm going to come in here and just do this a little darker. So on my original, I just used Balmy Blue. I wanted it to be that really bright blue. And then you just keep adding layers and get a little bit darker each time. And I'm not coloring the whole space. I'm leaving some white space in there. So you could color it in all the way or whatever you are comfortable with. And I'm just doing one side of her covering here. And I'm doing this side a little darker because we know it's definitely away from the light. And you just get a lighter hand toward the edge, and I'm doing circles to kind of help smooth out those lines and help it fade a little bit. So just practice coloring with different pressures. So there's Mary. And then for Joseph and Jesus, I'm going to use these three colors. And I have not colored in a skin tone. So if that's something that you want to color in, feel free. I've just been leaving mine white, but the blends do have skin tones in the natural tones. But I feel like for the pencils, we have Early Espresso, and then we do have Calypso Coral and Flirty Flamingo, but I don't really think those are good for skin tones. If you do a really light hand, they work, but if you get them too dark, well, the Early Espresso would work, but I don't think we have any really good pinks that work well. So I've left a little light here. So what I've been using when I color in the skin tones with the pencils is I've just been using Early Espresso. So you could certainly do that. So I'm just layering, I'm just putting a layer of crushed curry. I'm kind of doing it quick, but I feel like this texture definitely lends to probably the type of garments they might have had. Probably rough textiles. And I'm not leaving really any white space on Joseph's outfit like I did Mary's. I'm just coloring it in. Then I came in with Cajun Craze, and I just added a layer on top. I'm trying to influence the color here so it's not just early espresso. Again, you can do a light hand. Oops, I'm not being too perfect. As you can see, I just got it on his hand, but that's okay. You can erase this pencil. And I'm kind of leaving space, a little bit of space. I want this to just kind of mix in together. Okay, and then I'm going to come in with early espresso. Okay, I do have my eraser here. So if you make a little mistake and it's really noticeable, you can come in with I use these poly erasers. They work great and they don't harm your cardstock. So this is early espresso, and I'm just going to come in and go right over top of those colors. And I'm going to color the staff this color, so I'm not too concerned if it overlaps. So I'm just trying to layer that color and give it a little depth. And you can kind of crosshatch and go different directions, whatever you feel, whatever texture you feel you like. I'm just darkening it up a little bit. And I want to do this top part. And I just have a lighter hand here. I don't want it to be as dark as the bottom part. And then the staff, I just did heavy hand here. And I filled it in with early espresso. I need to sharpen my pencils a little bit. Didn't get in there very well. Got his hand again. That's all right. Everybody has little boo-boos when they're making cards. Okay, so now we're on to baby Jesus here. Let me color this shadow here. And I did him mostly in this crushed curry. And Cajun Craze. And then I just layered it. So I came back with the crushed curry. And then added just a little bit of early espresso. So I just like to play with the pencils and layer it how you like. Like I said, you could crosshatch here. You can come back in with the lighter color and add a little bit on top if you want it a little bit lighter or have more of a yellow. This reminds me of like a wheat tone. And that's what I just felt went well. So there's our pencils. Now, all we have to do is stamp our words and finish off our card. Now the inside piece, I do have my words already set up on my Stamparatus. And then I just stamped with a block for this piece. The Weary World Rejoices is from that Hope and Peace set. So this is really a great set. It has a lot of different sayings that you can use. But I just really love, I think that this saying goes really well with this image. Now, the sayings in the Piece to You stamp set are great as well. I love the font. The Light of the World, Silent Night, Holy Night. And then the inside we stamped, May God's Hope and Love Shine on You This Season. That's the inside of this card. And Peace to You at Christmas. So there's a lot of great images, and the greetings are wonderful if you're looking for a religious set for Christmas. So I'm just trying to find a block. I think this one will work. I like to look and make sure that it is even, just like we did on the image stamp. So I'm going to bring in this piece, and we're going to use Night of Navy. Okay. I'm going to try to get this straight. So I typically stamp a bigger piece and then cut it down. That works fine. So that I can just stamp and then not worry about if it's straight. But I pre-cut all the pieces for this card, so we're going to go with whatever happens. So we're starting to build our card here. Hold that for a second. I'm going to take my bone folder and really crease where I scored that paper. And then this is going to just layer on here. So you don't need any special dies to make this card. The only tool that I've used other than the trimmer to cut my paper is the Stamparatus. So let's scoot this over for a second. And I'm going to take this plate off. We do have 2 plates that come with this, so I'm just going to remove the one I don't need since I don't have a lot of space right here. And I already have this set up to stamp the inside of my card. So it still has a little ink on it even. Now, something I do, a little tip here, I like to put my paper in, put my clean stamp where I think I want it, and then I pull this away and ink this up and make sure that it's going to stamp straight or mostly straight so that you can see on the grid paper how this lines up. The grid paper is an extra item that you can buy to go with your Stamparatus, and they're great. This is a 7x7 grid paper. We do have bigger grid paper, but this works for the Stamparatus, and you can use it anywhere that you're stamping to help protect your area. So I'm just going to put my magnet on there, ink this up again, and then stamp. And I like to just hold it there for a second and make sure that I get a good stamp. If I didn't like it, you could stamp it again if something didn't stamp right, ink it again if you want it to be darker. So this is an excellent tool to have for your card making. And that is all the stamping there is for this card. Okay, so now I'm going to assemble. So there's our card. We could stamp our envelope. So if you wanted Mother Mary, you could go put this back into your Stamparatus and sponge around and just get Mother Mary and stamp it on the corner of your envelope. Or you can leave it plain. You could stamp some words on the back of your envelope if you'd like to dress it up, or add, if there's a designer series paper that you like, you could add that on as well. Okay, we are ready to assemble. I didn't do anything fancy here. I just used liquid glue, and then I did put some dimensionals on the back of my greeting for the front. And I'm putting it off to the right a little bit more, just so I have room for this greeting to hang off over here. And it looks like I did get the grid paper, so we do have a little texture on the top and bottom. Love it. Unexpected results. And I'm just going to use 3 dimensionals on that. So I'm not too worried about how perfect that was, because some of it's getting covered up. So I'm just hanging it off the left there for a little bit. You could even maybe put it at the top if you like that arrangement better. Then I'm going to adhere this on the inside. And we have our finished card. So there we go. I hope you have enjoyed this card. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked today's video, and subscribe to my channel so that you can see my future content. So I'm going to show you a couple more samples with this card set, or with this stamp set, I mean. So on this one, I did a little inlay here, and I want to tell you some tips on if you would like to cut this image in a circle. I used the Stella Shapes. Let me pull those out here to cut this circle, and I used the second one from the largest. So I used what I call number 2. I label mine number 1 is the largest, number 2, and so on. So I used a number 2 after I stamped my image, and then I used the number 1 and the number 2 in some silver foil to create this frame. And because foil paper cost a little bit more, by cutting out this circle, I could lay this image inside it and save that circle for another project. So what I did, obviously the circle does not fit on this image. So here's a tip if you would like to adjust it a little bit. So here's this circle, and I cut this like this, and I just made sure I had even amounts on either side. And then I used my Stampin' Write Night of Navy marker, and I colored it. Now, because I stamped this several times, 2 or 3 times, the Night of Navy ink was very dark compared to the marker. So what I did is I colored this in, and I kind of blended, or not really blended, but overlapped where this hard line was. I let it dry, and I did that 3 times to kind of balance that color. So you can see it is a little bit darker around the edge, but it's okay because I made it that way, and I think it kind of helps this look like it's lighter around the image, but then it's darker around here. So that's a little tip if you'd like to use a circle instead of a square or rectangle. You can use that shape and just adjust it. And then I embossed Emmanuel, God with us. And on the inside of this one, I did wishing you the hope and peace of Christ this season. So that again is from that Hope and Peace stamp set. It works perfectly. And instead of coloring my Holy Family, I used Wink of Stella on the star. Hopefully you guys can see that. On the star and on baby Jesus. So just highlighting them. Here's one of the originals that I did. This is colored with the blends. And this piece, I used stitched rectangles to cut out my piece, and I didn't do any background coloring. I just left it white. And then for this piece, I used this banner that's in the Stylish Shapes dies. And then I decided I didn't like the fishtail, so I just cut it off. So that's how I got that little scrap piece with the stitching on it. So don't be afraid to adjust and do a different plan. So let's see, I'm going to show you the church image now. And I love this image. I think it will be great for cards with lots of different color schemes, and also to make as multiple sets. So I've played around with some colors. Here's my Night of Navy. Now these are cut with that large square in that Stylish Shapes. So this is that starry sky. See that beautiful blue violet color. These are Night of Navy. And this is a retired color, Pretty Peacock. I had it out and I was playing, so I decided to try it. This is Bermuda Bay. I just love teals for Christmas time, so I wanted to try some teal color schemes. Now, one tip that I have with the Stamparatus and this stamp, sometimes red rubber stamps do squish when you stamp with them. So what I mean by that is when I'm pressing this down, usually you're pretty safe no matter how much pressure you put on it. But I do want to say one tip for this church. And let me see if I can. So on this one, hopefully you can see it. I pressed really hard over this door area, and it actually kind of squished out from the solid line. So you can see from this image, it's nice and crisp. Well, this one I pressed a little too hard. So when you're doing your church, just be weary of that area so that you're not pressing too hard. It doesn't bother me that that looks like that. Most people probably wouldn't notice, but I did. So I want to pass that tip on to you. Now, I made a very simple card with the church. And I don't know if you can see the glimmer, but I did put Wink of Stella on there. It's the clear one that Stampin' Up! Sells. And this one, you don't need any special tools to make this card as far as dies. So I stamped my image on a sheet like this, and then I cut it down. And I left it a little long down here so I could stamp my greeting. And I used Wink of Stella on the trees and the cross, and then some snow here. And then I popped it up on dimensionals. So you can make a very simple card without dies. And on the inside, I used that same saying that I used on the card we made today. But I like to add a little bit of weight sometimes to the inside of my card. So I actually matted this little piece on a Night of Navy. And I just did it 1/8 of an inch bigger. So this piece is 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And I just did 1/8 of an inch bigger for my mat. So I love that simple classic card. And then I did some fun color schemes and added in some designer series paper. I absolutely love teal colors with reds at Christmas time. I just think it's a very fun color scheme. And even if we have cards that seem religious, we can still make them fun. So on these two cards, I stamped with some brighter colors. And I also used the Sweetest Christmas Designer Series paper that is in the July to December 22 mini catalog. So this one is a 2-inch strip. I used the stitched rectangles. Now this one I stamped and then cut. This one I cut it and then stamped it. So I had a little bit more white space at the top. Now this is Pool Party and this is Basic Gray, and it mimics the colors that are over here in this striped paper. And I just stamped the inside with Merry Christmas. Again, I stamped on a layer and then adhered it inside my card. This one is Real Red and Bermuda Bay. I just wanted some fun colors. And I stamped them the same, just using different Designer Series paper. This Designer Series paper is at 3 inches. So when you cut your Designer Series paper at 2 inches, 3 inches, or 4 inches, you're going to get a lot more usable pieces out of your Designer Series paper. This strip is by 5.5, so that it is the full length of my card. This one's at 5 1/4. So you end up with a few little extra strips because you get about a 1-inch strip left over, and you can cut that down and use those on the inside of your card as well, or make a fun layered strippy background for one of your cards. So those are my samples I have for you using the Piece to You stamp set. I really hope that you've enjoyed seeing these. Please let me know. Give me a thumbs up. And always, if you have questions, feel free to comment or message me. I will put my email down in the description of this video, along with the link to the coloring video for this. And I want to tell you, if you are familiar with Stampin' Up, then you know about Celebration. And Celebration is right now, July and August of 22. And when you buy the Piece to You stamp set and the Hope and Peace stamp set, and maybe a bottle of glue or a pack of dimensionals, you're going to earn at least one Celebration item. And there's so many things to choose from. I actually think this silver and gold Designer Series paper would go really well with this set. I haven't played with it just yet, but I will. So there's lots of free things to pick. There's a level 1 at $50 and level 2 at $100. So I want to make sure you get the most bang for your buck. So if these are on your list, you can earn a free item in July or August with your purchase. And that is before tax. And I can only sell in the US. I've had a couple of emails. So I'm only able to sell if you live within the US or have a US address. So thank you so much for joining me. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.